Welcome to Daily Review, your daily dose of literary exploration. We dive into books that spark curiosity and ignite growth. While our passion often leads us to nonfiction reads that empower and improve your life, no book is off limits. From gripping thrillers to insightful memoirs and compelling fiction to historical accounts, we're here to share and discuss all the interesting reads we discover. Today, we're embarking on a particularly essential deep dive into excerpts from a book titled The Uncomfortable Truth About Money: How to Live with Uncertainty and Think for Yourself by Paul Podolsky. This isn't just a typical finance book. It's a deeply personal journey through the often anxious world of money, sharing insights gained from decades of experience, from struggling financial journalist to hedge fund partner.
It truly is. Podolsky offers a remarkably candid look at how money profoundly shapes our lives, often in, uncomfortable ways. His framework isn't about getting rich quick, but about understanding money deeply so you can think for yourself. It covers everything from your personal relationship with money to the intricate mechanics of global finance, and even touches on the profound connection between wealth and overall well-being. Ultimately, it's about learning to distinguish logic from emotion, which is critical for making better decisions in a world of constant change.
Okay, so let's unpack this uncomfortable truth. Our mission today is to extract the most important nuggets of knowledge from Podolsky's insights, giving you a shortcut to being well-informed about money and exploring what it truly means to live with it for you. Podolsky opens with a stark but compelling core concept. Money is a cage, and everyone, regardless of their wealth, is confined by it, sometimes physically, sometimes mentally. To truly live, he argues, you need a strategy to navigate and live within its confines.
Yeah, it's a powerful framing. It immediately challenges that common idea of money simply equaling freedom, doesn't it?
It really does. What does this cage tell us about our ingrained relationship with wealth?
Well, Podolsky gets very personal right away. He doesn't just present the concept, he takes us into his own moment of reckoning with this cage.
Okay.
He openly admits that initially he saw people focused on money as kind of narrow-minded, like they were missing out on the richer experiences of life.
He admired the adventurous writer type, right? Like Hemingway.
Exactly, not someone chasing dollars. But he found out that perspective was, a luxury born of ignorance, really.
And his big wake-up call, the moment it all clicked. It's incredibly vivid. 1997, he's 29, holding his little son Sasha's hand on a Brooklyn sidewalk.
Yeah. And he sees this line of, as he puts it, rotund rats just ambling between his building and some leaking garbage cans.
Such a potent image of, squalor. What did that moment spark in him?
That sight, that harsh reality just to cut through everything. The thought that hit him was stark. Paul, this is not working. Something needs to change fast.
Wow.
He needed money. Not for fancy stuff, but just to move apartments, to get his family into a better, safer place.
Just basic need.
Absolutely. At that time, he was way down the ladder in financial journalism, making only $38,000 a year in New York City, married with a child.
That's tough in NYC.
Incredibly tough. He felt totally ill-equipped. He even mentions asking this seasoned cotton trader, Tony, about the market and getting these cryptic answers like bid, weather.
Huh? What did that even mean?
He only figured it out later. It meant cotton prices were up because bad weather was threatening the crop. Simple supply and demand, but it felt like a secret language.
So his understanding really grew out of necessity.
Completely. Out of necessity and these specific, often uncomfortable real-world moments. It was a journey from being totally confused to gaining some hard-won clarity, learning to separate the logic from the emotion.
Which he says led to calmer, better decisions eventually.
Exactly. And that personal experience reshaped how he even defined money.
Right. He says it's not just cash, it's credit too.
And it's a dollar, a euro, a yen. Its value is always relative, always shifting.
It pays for needs, like food, but also wants, like that snazzy shirt he mentions. And crucially, for emergencies, medical stuff.
Yeah, the unexpected things. So it's numbers and facts, absolutely, but it's also deeply tied to emotions and sensations.
And that dual nature. And maybe that explains the anxiety. He says people think about it constantly, worrying about being short.
Constantly. But it's still taboo, isn't it? People share everything online, education, even, intimate photos.
But not their bank balance.
Never. Podolsky thinks it's rooted in this universal insecurity.
How so?
Well, if you have too little, it feels like a personal failure, right? Something to be ashamed of.
Yeah, definitely.
But if you have too much, you fear resentment or people asking you for money all the time.
So there's anxiety on both ends.
Absolutely. He even observes that really wealthy people often don't feel rich because they're comparing themselves to people even wealthier. It's this endless anxiety-ridden ladder.
So the silence is like a shield, a protective thing.
Kind of shield, yeah. But maybe a damaging one in the long run.
Which brings him to this idea of financial fluency. He basically says life's just easier if you get it. It's a basic life skill.
Like swimming or first aid, he says. You need the big picture and the small details. And you need to grasp that its value is always flickering, changing.
Like a candle flame.
Yeah, nice image. And his goal with the book, and what we're trying to do here, is share that understanding so you don't have to learn it the hard way through painful necessity like he did.
And it's crucial, he points out, that even reaching the top, becoming an equity partner or Bridgewater, a huge hedge fund, didn't erase the anxiety.
Right. That's fascinating. He's still worried about money. He really stresses that a meaningful life is way more important than just piling up cash. Money's just a tool, an important one, but still a tool.
He talks about needing to occupy two mental spheres at once.
Yeah, reverent awe and practical reality. He gives examples of awe like bird watching with his dying mother, holding his kids, reading a perfect sentence. Moments where money is just irrelevant.
Beautiful moments.
Yeah.
But then reality intrudes.
Always. Those moments of awe get interrupted by practical stuff. He had to scramble for $2,000 in cash crisp $100 bills to bribe doctors in Moscow for Sasha's birth.
Wow. Bribe them.
Yeah, because in Russia back then, doctors relied on those under-the-table payments. That, plus the rats. It cemented the reality of rent, health insurance, electricity bills, things you can't ignore.
He thinks the very rich sometimes lose their way because they lose that tether.
Exactly. They lose touch with practical reality.
Which leads to this idea of the missing money talk. The sex talk, however awkward.
Right, he did that with his kids, like his dad did with him. But he realized they never had the money talk.
So the book is partly that missing conversation.
For his kids, and for all of us, really. He argues passionately that being money aware doesn't kill the awe. It actually enables it.
How so?
By handling the practical stuff, like figuring out funeral costs, you free yourself up. You ensure those bigger moments aren't totally swamped by financial stress right up to the end.
So financial fluency isn't a cage in itself. It's actually the key out of the anxiety cage.
That's the core insight, I think. It's the foundation for genuine freedom and meaning, letting you live with both the practical stuff and the profound moments.
Okay, so money's a cage, and fluency helps us navigate it. But then Podolsky throws another curveball.
Yeah.
We want stability for money, but it just can't provide it.
Right. It's fundamentally unstable, so the focus has to shift inward to what you can control.
Which is your mindset.
Exactly. And he breaks down these forces of disruption, starting with our own internal stuff, our emotional reflexes.
How do those play in?
He argues our emotional relationship with money is deeply stamped by our early life experiences, which are often totally random. He uses himself as an example.
Yeah.
His mother, dying young from cancer, really affected his equilibrium, made him more high-strung, always aware things could go wrong.
That makes sense.
But then his father, a calm, scientific type who worked on the Manhattan Project, gave him this grounding in education, frugality, a sort of sober approach.
So like conflicting imprints, anxiety and practicality.
Kind of a mix, yeah, a dual imprint.
It's fascinating how much of our financial wiring is set before we even know it. Like his wife growing up in the Soviet Union.
Right, facing shortages, an abusive father. It made her incredibly practical about money. More is better, don't waste it. Very straightforward.
And their kids had their own challenges, adoption trauma, learning styles. Like his own dyslexia diagnosis at 19.
Yeah, he said it made him feel unpredictably stupid. And his point is, we see our own upbringing as normal, but it's totally random lottery.
He mentions the census data, right?
Yeah.
Huge wealth gaps between households.
Exactly. It underscores that money isn't everything, but it's definitely something. It determines if your zip code has rats or not, basically.
So are we just stuck with this random emotional wiring?
No, and that's the hopeful part. He believes you can work on these emotional deficits. He lists very concrete things: sleep, diet, exercise, therapy, yoga, meditation, religious practice.
Things that calm the mind.
Things that calm the mind. He says his wife, lots of people they know have worked on becoming calmer for decades. It's like the essential first step to being good with money.
He even speculates about some super wealthy people, like Gates or Buffett or Dalio.
Yeah, he wonders if they might have a certain wiring maybe like undiagnosed Asperger's, similar to his own father, less emotional fluctuation, stronger analytical focus.
Interesting thought.
But for most of us with our emotional yo-yos, just learning to manage those jittery thoughts is huge. Recognizing anxiety, okay, I think I'm feeling anxious right now, instead of being totally hijacked by it. That's step one for navigating disruption.
Okay, so that's the internal disruption. What about the external stuff, the economic chaos?
Well, that's driven by entrepreneurial drive and technology, computers, AI now. It causes constant, unpredictable change.
This is Schumpeter's creative destruction.
Exactly. The economy is always churning, destroying old industries, creating new ones. Horses to cars, typewriters to Microsoft.
Cab drivers to Uber.
Right. He uses his own childhood job delivering the Washington Post. Back then, the Post was incredibly powerful.
Dominated classified ads.
Totally. And then the internet just wiped that out. And eventually, who buys the Post? Jeff Bezos, an internet disruptor. It shows how fast the ground shifts.
And societies that resist this change.
They tend to suffer. Think the Soviet Union, North Korea, wealth declines, repression increases. Resisting change has a huge cost. Risk aversion isn't free.
He contrasts government jobs with the private sector, too.
Yeah, government offers more stability, usually, but the payoff is lower. The market naturally finds this balance between people's desire for money and their need for stability.
And he's seen plenty of big economic shifts himself.
Oh, yeah. The Asian crisis in '98, the tech crash in 2000, the 2008 credit crisis, the pandemic. He talks about that gut-wrenching feeling of saving, say, $100,000, working hard for it.
And then seeing it shrink overnight in a crisis.
Exactly. Tens of thousands gone in days. That really tests your emotional resilience.
He touches on theories behind crises, too, mentioning Ray Dalio.
Yeah, his former boss. Dalio was heavily influenced by the Great Depression and believed crises repeat because of debt.
How does debt cause that instability?
Well, debt lets you spend now, but it creates a future obligation. Most economies have way more debt than income, so if everyone tries to pay off debt at the same time, spending collapses, cash vanishes, it's structurally unstable.
And George Soros, his idea of reflexivity.
Right. That's more about asset prices and psychology.
Right.
Buying a stock pushes the price up, making you feel richer, so you spend more, which maybe pushes the stock up more. A self-feeding loop.
Even if, logically, the stock is now more expensive, riskier.
Exactly. The takeaway from both is that the system is inherently volatile. And volatility isn't just a finance term, it's the rate of change.
The choppy water.
Good analogy. Traders use it for market swings, like the NASDAQ. But Podolsky makes a key point. That same choppiness applies to your job, your savings, your health.
You could get fired, get sick, and the market crashes all at once.
It happens. Even whole countries can collapse. Russia, 1917, Venezuela more recently. So the ultimate mindset shift is build disruption into your expectations.
Don't expect smooth sailing.
Right. Expect choppiness. And develop the ability to stay calm enough to think clearly when it hits. Recognizing that anxiety flare-up, okay, feeling anxious is huge. True stability isn't from money. It's from your internal resilience.
All right, navigating disruption requires resilience. Now, Podolsky gets practical. How do you actually earn money? He defines work pretty bluntly, doesn't he?
He does. Trading liberty for money. Stark, but honest in a way.
But he acknowledges perks, too. Journalism paid badly, but gave him amazing access. Gorbachev, Clinton.
And the satisfaction of seeing his byline. Even his bike courier job had funny radio chatter. But he doesn't romanticize the struggle. He lists all the jobs he did: carpenter, teacher, cleaner, bartender.
Mountain guide, banker, investor. Quite the list.
And he realized you can work incredibly hard and still not earn much. Like him living on 38K's Brooklyn with his wife and son sleeping on the kitchen floor.
So he breaks income down into 4 key things to consider. What are they?
Okay, first, what do you need? Second, what can you offer? Third, scale. And fourth, change.
Let's start with what do you need? What does he mean by that?
He means a hard number. A minimum after-tax figure, ideally tracked on a spreadsheet, like using a scale if you're managing weight.
So tracking expenses, averaging them, cutting non-essentials.
Exactly, measuring the flow, but also measuring your level, your savings versus your debt, your breathing room. The key question, if your income vanished tomorrow, how long could you last?
He notes rich people own assets others pay for. Rent, shares.
Right. And he stresses early frugality. He recalls his date night with his wife being just a shared cup of tea at Starbucks.
He mentions his grandpa as the patron saint of frugality.
Yeah, lived through everything: world wars, depression, inflation, hated TV, loved the library, didn't own a house, drove to rural Mexico in winter.
Wow.
Podolsky also learned from camping. Nature really clarifies essential versus superfluous, clean water versus a thick mattress. Modern life is full of superfluous stuff.
Cable TV, eating out all the time?
Right. His wife knew this instinctively from her Soviet upbringing. The core point is, define safety apartment, food, decent medical care, and know exactly what that costs. That's your foundation.
Okay, second point. What do you offer?
This is interesting. He says school often shows you what you're bad at, not necessarily your unique talent. In today's global job market, you really need to know your specific gift.
Certifications still matter though, right? College degrees.
Undeniably. The earnings gap is real. He
Yeah.
slogged through his BA in economics grad degree. He contrasts himself with his grandpa, smart guy, but limited by having no credentials, sold soap, ran a farm.
Whereas his father had a clear path.
Yeah.
PhD, NIH.
Exactly. Driven by passion from age 7, his dad valued education, even if his advice, doctors aren't smart, so you should become one, kind of stung Podolsky.
Huh. So how do you know when you have enough education or certification?
His take is, when the certification is no longer a barrier to what you want to do. He needed degrees for writing and investing, but more degrees wouldn't help after a point. And remember, schools are businesses. They'll happily sell you more degrees.
So you have to be mindful of the return on investment.
Definitely. It took him a long time to figure out his offering, explaining the world and investing by combining history, journalism, languages, culture, economics, markets.
That multidisciplinary thing again.
Yeah. Finding your unique offering might not be a straight line.
Okay. Third, scale. How does that work?
Basically, how do you apply your offering to earn more? You can do a job few can do, requiring years of training, like a brain surgeon. Limited supply drives up the price.
Or a job with inherent scale.
Right, like a software engineer whose work can reach millions. Or a mix. But even with training, scale varies. A classical musician playing Beethoven faster doesn't earn more.
But one scoring films does. Mass audience.
Precisely. He mentions his relative, Rob, who broke the mold, took student loans, traded on Wall Street, turned $100K into $1 million. That really opened Podolsky's eyes, made him realize getting rich was a possibility, a choice even.
He compares airlines and Google too.
Great example. Airlines have scale fly anywhere but huge costs, heavy regulation, limits profits. Google mainly pays for people and code, sells to the world. Massive scale, massive profit.
And Wall Street has scale because trading $100 isn't much different from trading $100,000.
Exactly. The mechanics are similar, which leads to that moment when Jason, the currency strategist, offers him a job. $200K a year, maybe $1 million if he's good.
And his wife Marina's reaction.
Simple. Are you crazy? Take it.
Yeah.
Huge potential shift for them. The insight on scale is leveraging your gift to multiply your impact beyond just trading time for money.
And the final element, change.
Crucial. Constant change means you need to adapt, see what's coming. Innovation waves shape everything. Most companies he worked for faded or disappeared.
Washington Post, Bank Boston.
Right. He survived by jumping from one iceberg to the next. And big income always attracts competition, which eventually erodes that income.
So how do you detect these shifts?
Pay attention to your own behavior. Buying music digitally instead of CDs. Using online pharmacies. Those are clues about bigger shifts.
Be cautious about jobs easily disrupted by tech. Cashiers, paralegals.
Yeah, or oil change places with EVs coming, property in flood zones. But the absolute key isn't just seeing the change, it's knowing if it's already priced in by the market.
Okay. That's harder.
Much harder. The main takeaway is income isn't fixed. It's this dynamic dance with a changing economy, requires constant learning, adaptation, strategic moves.
Okay, so income is dynamic. To really get money, Podolsky says you have to understand prices, both the price you get paid your salary and the prices you pay.
Exactly. And a price isn't just a static number. It's a measure of supply and demand right now, but it's also an expectation about the future.
Like a stock price reflecting future earnings.
Precisely. He sees prices as almost like physics, not man-made rules. Demand for essentials is primal. You can't just legislate it away.
He uses the COVID example, right? Thermometers hitting $1,000.
Yeah, and black markets popping up when governments tried price controls. The underlying forces are too strong. And technology constantly changes prices, too.
Like sending a telegram versus a free text message.
Right. He remembers sending a telegram from Moscow in 1990. Arrived safely, all is well, cost per letter. Now it's free. So you have to decide where you fit in this money flow.
High stress, high pay like a surgeon. Or lower pay, more predictable like a gardener.
Yeah, you have to choose. High pay and low stress probably doesn't exist. And if you want to accumulate wealth, the formula is simple, if not easy. Earn at the high end, consume at the low end.
like the trader driving a beat-up Subaru and shopping at Costco.
Exactly. Wealth often means paying close attention to the prices you pay.
Let's talk labor prices. He says nobody agrees on what's fair.
It's a perennial problem. How do you balance providing for basic needs with rewarding talent, effort, risk-taking? It's tough.
And shifts in wealth, like the top 1% gaining more, cause political instability.
Absolutely. Feeds that feeling the system is rigged. And taxes are a huge factor. He mentions U.S. capital gains versus income tax rates as an example. But even regulation struggles against raw supply and demand.
Like needing a plumber on Christmas Day. You pay more.
You pay more. He saw it starkly in the Soviet Union. They tried to pay doctors and coal miners equally, but black markets emerged for doctors because the demand for critical care is immense.
Like him paying the Moscow doctors for his son's birth.
Exactly. It's not necessarily about fairness in some abstract sense, but about market forces reflecting scarcity and demand. He cautions against overestimating your own worth in the market. Be realistic about skills, competition, what others will actually pay.
Okay, what about consumption prices? The stuff we buy.
Driven by supply, technology, productivity, and demand, which is heavily shaped by income distribution.
Meaning the spending of high-income people pushes prices up for everyone.
Disproportionately, yes. For things like housing, healthcare, education, luxury goods, it makes them unaffordable for many. He calls it a brutal truth. The system is structurally set up for some people to be in pain.
He mentions his own struggles with medical bills, car repairs.
Yeah, feeling that pinch. Which leads to this uncomfortable moral choice. To live with less stress yourself, you often end up benefiting from a system where someone else is in that uncomfortable spot. His move to banking solved his rat problem, but created a new question. How much is enough to save? And as his salary grew, his idea of necessary shifted too. Consumption follows income easily.
He didn't buy Chanel purses, but his view on cars changed.
Dramatically. After a bad car crash, someone died, safety became paramount. He researched insurer data, found Audi was safest, and bought one costing twice what he'd ever paid. A conscious trade-off. Frugality versus safety.
Contrasting that with his grandpa living cheaply in Mexico.
Right. Lower cost, but the quality reflected the price. His grandmother died from a stroke there, possibly due to lower quality care. It highlights the trade-offs and challenges countries face in retaining talent when prices are low.
This brings us to his idea of castes. Not just race, but money and power.
Exactly, though they can overlap. Education is a big caste marker. He cites Fed data showing college grads have 10 times the wealth of non-high school grads in the U.S. Degrees act as gatekeepers, even if the job doesn't strictly need one. Bill Gates is the exception, not the rule.
And geography is a caste system, too. North America versus Africa.
Huge difference. Tied to the Industrial Revolution, energy use. It's just harder to earn if you're uneducated in a poor region. Even personal habits can correlate with caste marriage, addictions.
He talks about his own caste shift when he went into banking.
Yeah, it was jarring. Same basic work, analyzing, writing, but totally different culture, different jargon, getting paid. His idea of good pay, $75K, was peanuts to colleagues talking about $1, $1 million, or needing $2 million to retire and garden.
He felt like an imposter.
Definitely. And sensed resentment from others about bankers' easy money. But he quickly saw the scale.
The foreign exchange example. Moving $1 billion isn't harder than moving $10 million.
Right. Tiny spreads on huge volumes equal massive profits, like $526K on $1 billion trade. But the risk was huge too. Nick Leeson losing $2 billion. He realized the seat, the bank's license, and infrastructure determined the pay, not just the trader.
High turnover, though. Constant insecurity.
People vanished constantly. HR emails, then gone. He learned the unwritten rules, too, like suit colors. No brown suits on the trading floor, only black, gray, or blue.
Castes within castes, like prop trading.
Yeah, proprietary trading using the bank's own money was higher status, higher risk. Ray Dalio essentially took that function and built Bridgewater around it. Ray, wearing shorts and Crocs, signaled his autonomy, that he made the rules.
And Podolsky's move to Bridgewater was another jump.
Another caste jump. He got fired from BofA during a merger, but his stock options vested that day, making him an instant millionaire. Just shows the instability again.
Crazy timing.
Totally. Ray hired him because he was hungry, with significant obligations. Put him through a tough crash course. But even there, Ray, the owner, made vast wealth. Podolsky, as staff, got a modest bump.
Why did he leave Bridgewater after 16 years?
He'd saved enough, but more importantly, he craved being an owner, not, as he puts it, a subordinate. Writing this book is part of becoming his own owner, shaping his own ideas.
So breaking caste is possible, but hard.
Very hard, but possible. Often involves finding ways to legally break the implicit rules that hold others back. Understanding these invisible structures is key.
Okay, let's talk about the workplace itself. Podolsky is blunt here. Office politics matter. A lot.
He really stresses this and says the best players are so good you don't even realize they're playing. But at minimum, you have to learn to advocate for yourself.
It's tough for people who just want to do good work and hope it gets noticed. Why is that enough?
Because workplace success isn't like school. Good grades don't guarantee anything. He's seen Harvard grads fired. Being good at your job and helpful is your best protection. But how your contribution is valued and compensated is often subjective.
It's not always clear-cut.
Exactly. Unlike, say, a baseball pitcher with clear stats, or maybe a money manager with a performance record, many jobs, writer, teacher, lawyer, salesperson, lack that objective clarity. So disagreements about value are inevitable.
And the employer wants to pay less, you want more. Natural tension.
Right. So he outlines this campaign you need to run to make sure your contributions get seen favorably.
What's the first step in this campaign?
Understanding hierarchy. Know the org chart. Who reports to whom? Who controls the money? If you want to get paid well, minimize the layers between you and the decision makers or the revenue streams.
How did he use this?
At the bank, he focused on helping the sales team and staying aligned with Jim, his boss's boss. Knew Jim was bullish on the dollar, so he tailored his market calls. It's about acting like a peer, but subtly reinforcing the boss's authority, like saying, the president believes.
He admits he struggled with respecting hierarchy sometimes.
Yeah, and it led to him being undermined. So know the power map, align with the powerful.
Second element, personalities.
Treat it like bird watching. Catalog everyone's strengths, biases, quirks. He mentions Obama playing golf and poker to learn how to connect with people.
He went shopping with his boss, Jason, to Philine's basement.
He did. HR would hate it, he says, calling it bias. But he saw it as pure survival, building rapport. Same with Jim's boat parties. Circulate, show appreciation, don't cling, acknowledge the host's effort. Subtle stuff builds allies.
Sounds exhausting. Okay, third, bullies and tells.
Organizations can be hostile, people wear masks. A tell is that unexpected glimpse behind the mask.
He tells that story about the GQ salesman.
Yeah, handsome guy. Tried to bully Podolsky on market views after Jason left. Podolsky fought back with a kind of ugly tactic, commenting on the guy's weight.
Wow, really?
He admits it was ugly, but says it worked because it stopped a peer acting like a boss. A brutal tactic for a specific situation.
He highlights the need to understand your own tells, too. His was losing analytical focus when unsure.
Right, which led to metaphorical punches at Bridgewater. He learned to compensate by sending drafts to analytical colleagues first. Know others' tells, but crucially, know your own weaknesses.
Fourth point, safety. Making others feel safe.
It's fundamental, Maslow's hierarchy, right? Security first. Even if it's an illusion, making colleagues feel psychologically safe builds trust and allies.
Like him calming the nervous junior colleague during her presentation.
Exactly. A simple positive comment calmed her, instantly created an ally. Or choosing not to comment on a colleague who got drunk acceptance, not shame, builds bridges.
And the final element of the campaign, leverage.
You start with none, you need to build it. Can come from technical skill, the PhD with the complex spreadsheet, people skills, client relationships, or just staying put and gaining deep organizational knowledge.
He became senior just by not leaving.
Pretty much. Longevity builds leverage. This helps in salary talks, especially if you can get intel on what others make, like benchmarking reports. But getting fired resets the game.
And the more you know, the more valuable, but also more vulnerable.
It's a paradox. You're harder to replace, but maybe a bigger target too. He also talks about meeting jujitsu, being prepared, punctual, anticipating questions.
And seeing politics as part of the job, not a distraction.
Yes, especially where performance is subjective. Some colleagues dedicate themselves completely to the internal game. The conclusion: politics is a central work function, and saving money is your best defense. It reduces the organization's power over you.
All right, let's pivot to building that financial foundation. Saving and investing. Podolsky starts with a core idea. Bad things happen, so you need a large margin of error.
Absolutely, and the very first step isn't fancy investing. It's building an emergency fund, because emergencies happen way more often than we think.
He mentions that Fed survey, a third of U.S. households can't cover a $400 emergency.
Shocking, right? And he dismisses the standard save 3 months of expenses advice, calls it bad advice.
Why so insufficient?
Because your margin of error shouldn't be a generic rule. It needs to be calculated based on your specific life, your obligations, your aspirations.
So covering potential long-term unemployment.
Right, maybe 18 months or more. Plus all your debts, student loans, mortgage, expected big cost car, roof repairs, unexpected cost medical bills, co-pays. Maybe helping family, saving for a down payment.
It adds up quickly. And if you're in a cyclical industry like tech,
You need an even bigger buffer because you get laid off when everyone else is too. And this risk-free money, it should be truly risk-free, like short-term treasury bills. Not money market funds, which carry some risk.
your safety net needs to be custom built.
Exactly. Not one size fits all.
He uses that story about Sergei, his wife's friend from Russia, to show the danger of not having that buffer.
Yeah, it's a powerful case study. Sergei was a successful businessman but lacked money training. Borrowed from Podolsky for a leveraged real estate deal in Moscow.
And then disaster struck. Twice.
First, COVID killed tourism revenue. Then Putin's invasion, ruble collapse, sanctions. Sergei had zero margin of error, applied no imagination to what could go wrong, lost everything. Podolsky never got repaid.
What were the lessons there?
Don't rely on anyone else. Assume the world is cold. Be wary of fast talkers. Probe their logic. Keep emergency funds safe in stable currencies outside volatile places.
But he also warns against being too risk-averse, like his grandpa.
Right. Jerry and Grandpa missed out on huge potential gains by keeping too much cash. Grandpa's wealth could have been 15 times larger with stocks. It's about balance. Risk-free shouldn't dominate, but it can't be ignored.
He uses travel as a metaphor for risk, too. Moscow, India, Chile.
Yeah, risky trips but invaluable experiences. Life requires taking some calculated risks. Find your optimal balance. Too little risk is also costly.
Okay, let's talk debt. Rule number 1. Avoid credit card.
Completely. Calls it diabolical. Pay it off every month. Use it only for convenience.
Property debt is different, though. His wife pushed him on that.
Yeah, Marina's question in '98. Why pay rent when we could pay ourselves? Hit him hard, especially after the rat incident. But he was instinctively afraid of debt.
Saw it as less joyful than family, more constraining.
Yeah. Plus, Marina's cultural view, a real man owns his house. That pressure pushed him.
So they bought a house. Big risk.
Huge risk. $380,000 house, put down nearly all their savings. Maximum risk point. To cope with the fear, he started analyzing debt mathematically ratios like debt to equity, turned fear into numbers.
And he got lucky with interest rates falling.
Very lucky. The 2000 tech crash led the Fed to cut rates, making their mortgage cheaper, supporting house prices. But he's clear. He was lucky. And perceptions shift. They got used to the mortgage quickly.
Did the house end up being a good investment?
They made money selling it. But he calculates that renting and investing in a simple 60-40 portfolio would have actually done better, even with the crash. His second property was even worse than the market.
So his conclusion on houses.
You can live in it, sure, but financially, it's basically a bond trade. Very sensitive to interest rates, maintenance costs, and the opportunity cost of not investing elsewhere. Debt is a tool. Use it wisely. Understand it mathematically.
Okay, zooming out. Where does money actually come from? Central banks and credit.
Primarily. He uses that great Wizard of Oz analogy for the central bank. Oz for ounce, yellow brick road for gold standard. The central bank has the monopoly on creating money. Its actions directly impact your savings, your job.
Can you walk us through the mechanics? How do they print money?
Sure, it's not usually physical printing. Step 1, government spends more than it taxes, so the Treasury issues bonds to cover the gap. Step 2, commercial banks buy these bonds using customer deposits. Step 3, the Fed prints money, essentially adds zeros to a spreadsheet to buy those bonds from the commercial banks.
Injecting money into the banks.
Exactly. Step 4, the banks now have extra cash reserves, which they use to make new loans to people and businesses. That whole cycle creates new money.
And specific people pull these levers.
Yes, individuals at institutions. He mentions his uncle at the Fed, Paul Volcker, Wim Duesenberg. They make money scarcer or more plentiful, changing its cost.
And the real cost is the interest rate minus inflation.
The real interest rate. Higher real rates slow the economy, cause unemployment. He felt that in 1991 trying to find a job after college. He links the Great Depression to extremely tight money, a huge rise in real rates made worse by the gold standard.
The Fed has more flexibility now.
Much more, not being tied to gold. But it's still challenging, especially with new tech like AI affecting prices. How much money do you create then?
And the financial sector is the second source. banks matching borrowers and savers.
Right. Credit itself creates money, credit cards, mortgages. It echoes the central bank's actions. Money is always moving, creating these ripples. High rates help savers, often older, hurt borrowers, often younger.
Generational tension.
Yeah. And these self-reinforcing moves create bubbles and busts. Podolsky stresses humility here. So many moving parts. Prediction is hard. Differentiate the real economy, work, from assets, how work is financed. Understanding money's source is fundamental.
So saving and investing. What assets should we consider?
He lists the main ones: cash, stocks, bonds, commodities, currencies, real estate, but warns, investing is hard, takes a lifetime, trains your mind and body for stress.
What are his key guideposts?
1. Assets generally rise over time, that's why you invest. 2. They do better when the central bank prints, worse when it tightens. 3. You can break down asset cash flows into fundamental parts. 4. If you're totally lost, hold a diversified basket, maybe 13 house, 13 long bonds, 13 stocks.
Why diversify so much?
Because losses hurt compounding badly. A 50% loss needs a 120% gain just to get back to even. A steady 8-10% return with smaller drawdowns is better. Spread your bets.
He admits he was clueless about his 401k early on.
Totally. Learned it all through work, trading, reading Bridgewater. He stresses understanding key concepts, like discounting what's already baked into the price.
The market's expectation.
Right. A 10-year bond price already reflects some future inflation expectation. Then there's cash. Your starting point, inert, negative real return usually, but good when the Fed tightens. Stocks, ownership, value from earnings and PE ratio, but watch out for management whims. Bonds, the mathy ones. Loans, essentially. Price moves opposite to yield. Crucial for understanding money's cost. Different types exist.
Commodities, currencies, real estate.
Commodities like oil, copper, wheat rise with inflation, essential for civilization. Currencies are just prices for switching jurisdictions, dollar versus euro. Crypto and gold are non-government currencies. Real estate is basically like a bond rent is the yield, house value, the principal, but it's illiquid. Each asset behaves differently.
Okay, putting it together in a portfolio. Goals, compounding.
High, consistent compounding. Minimize losses. Understand risk, how much can it drop. He personally hates monthly swings over 4%. Losing 10% in a month really stings.
His advice on picking single stocks.
Mostly, don't bother. You probably don't have an edge. Prices reflect known info. Hot stocks usually have high PEs already. Unless it's your full-time job, you're unlikely to know more than the market.
So for most people.
Hold a diversified portfolio. Rebalance periodically. He shows the power of compounding starting early makes a huge difference. Think Warren Buffett. Diversification is holding assets that go up at different times, smoothing the ride.
He critiques the standard 60-40 portfolio.
Yeah, 60% stocks, 40% bonds. Says it's misleading because stocks are so much more volatile. It's really like an all-stock portfolio in terms of risk. Gets crushed when stocks fall, hurting long-term compounding.
Which leads to Dalio's all-weather idea. How does that work?
Dalio taught him this. The idea is to build a portfolio that does okay in any economic weather. Dalio identified 4 scenarios based on growth and inflation being higher or lower than expected.
So you allocate assets to cover all 4 seasons.
Exactly. Maybe 25% U.S. stocks, good in strong growth. 25% inflation-linked bonds, good in rising inflation. 25% nominal long bonds, good in falling growth inflation. Maybe some foreign stocks, some commodities. Assets have biases for certain environments.
Does Podolsky follow a strict formula himself?
No, he says his style is more like painting. Intuitive, daubing here and there, emotion first sometimes, then logic check. He even shorts things. Admits he's high-strung, worries at 2 a.m.
But that worry paid off with his Russian bonds.
It did. He sold them all just before the invasion, avoiding huge losses. Being jittery helped that time. His overall approach, diversify widely, bonds, stocks, real estate, illiquid stuff. Track fundamentals, assume things can worsen, know the difference between financial panics and wars, and always keep enough cash margin of error.
Lots of humility, though. Guarantees are offered in the morgue.
Exactly. When you lose money, first step is get back to a calm mindset. Meditate, walk, do less, think clearly. Investing is managing risk in an uncertain world.
So we've covered earning, saving, investing. Now the big question. When can you stop working? Podolsky's core concept seems simple, mathematically at least.
Right. Saved money divided by years left alive needs to be more than your annual expenses. But he stresses that money anxiety. It's probably permanent.
Too little money is bad, but he says too much isn't great either.
Yeah, limits keep us human, connect us. And your definition of enough evolves. As he got wealthier, he started seeing others' needs more: family in Russia needing health care, friends with mental health struggles.
So enough might need to include helping others.
He feels if you can earn, there's almost a responsibility to help your network, which means your enough number might grow. But beware, obsession some save out of a pathological fear of shortage. Remember, time is limited. Don't ignore money, but worry well about it.
Find that balance and the math for enough.
Years left. Use a lifespan calculator times annual expenses divided by the real interest rate on safe bonds. Gives you a target number. Say 100 a year for 20 years needs about $1.5 million saved.
He mentions annuities too.
Yeah, they pool risks so you don't outlive savings, but then you have the risk of the insurance company failing. And even with the math, that survival instinct pushes people to want more. Why billionaires work into their 90s.
He admits he was slow to see his own money illiteracy.
Very slow. Lived in a money miasma in college, thinking $15K was fine, not realizing he was subsidized by his dad's wealth via the university. Moscow, the roaches, the empty stores, that was the wake-up call. Money matters, like first aid.
Even back in NY making $38K, he felt broke.
Because costs were so high, the feeling of being money illiterate finally sank in. His first taste of excess money was that unexpected $20K bonus from Jim, the banker boss.
When he only had a few thousand saved. Must have felt huge.
Huge. He realized money put distance between me and the wolves, the crappy apartments, car trouble, high copays, then the BOFA firing windfall instant millionaire status, another shock about money's instability.
And the private plane trip with Ray Dalio.
That felt like too much money, disconnected him from others, made him question his own potential money addiction.
Okay, then he talks about Sniper's Alley, avoiding traps.
Yeah, self-inflicted wounds and toxic people, the two main snipers.
What are they?
First, and most likely, is disease. Cancer, heart disease, dementia. Some is luck. His parents died relatively young, friends dying in their 50s, but much is controllable.
Seatbelts, no smoking, sleep, exercise, nutrition.
Socialization, too. He admits investing messes with his sleep, but he prioritizes self-care. Even cut out alcohol sweets. Vitamin N, the ability to say no.
And the second sniper? Toxic people.
Just as dangerous. Psychological abuse, actual crime, his credit card stolen, identity theft. He's seen plenty of white-collar fraud, lying, manipulation. Marty with the BMW in the handicap spot.
How do you spot them? Look for tells.
Breaks in character. Lying about small things, padding expenses. Be aware of your own tells, too. He learned his own vulnerability, losing rigor when unsure. He also admits being fooled by people, even Putin initially.
So maintain distance if possible.
Emotional distance, especially if you can't get physical distance. Don't overshare, and watch out for self-inflicted damage. He uses his childhood shoplifting story. Guilt kept him straight later. Safeguard your health and protect yourself from toxic influences.
Planning for the unknown future. It's a paradox, isn't it?
Totally. We don't know how long we have. Statistics are averages, not your life. If his parents knew his mother would die young, they'd have spent more. His dad's long illness wiped out savings, the risk of having just barely enough.
So plan for a long life, but live for a short one.
Maximize wealth, but invest heavily in health. That's the paradox he suggests.
Which ultimately led him to quit the hedge fund. Salary goes to zero. That must have hurt.
He says it hurt, but the motivation was deeper, to focus on what do I think is true instead of managing bureaucracy, seeking autonomy.
He heard his mother's voice while rowing.
Yeah, asking, are you happy? That became his guide. Money buys autonomy, and for him, autonomy brings happiness. Recognizing anxiety gets easier with time, creates space between thought and feeling.
He sees the journey continuing, watches others.
Right. Learns what spending brings value, what's a waste. He contrasts himself with his father, who loved science but struggled with aging and loneliness, neglected social hobbies even with a stable income.
Could have used money for ballroom dancing, maybe.
Exactly. Invested in connection. The ultimate point of money, Podolsky concludes, isn't accumulation, it's experiencing the world more fully, not being trapped by anxiety.
Seeing soul at dawn, hearing chanting in India, seeing a bald eagle while rowing.
And the simple joy of being debt-free, it's all a gamble, paths, and probabilities. Find your mix. It's a daily struggle for balance, making room for that awe.
And that concludes our deep dive into the uncomfortable truth about money. It's clear that our relationship with money is complex, deeply personal, and constantly evolving. From recognizing its inherent instability to strategically building a margin of error, and even navigating the unseen currents of office politics, this deep dive has offered a truly comprehensive framework for thinking for yourself in the financial world.
Indeed. What's fascinating here is how Podolsky connects these macro financial concepts to intimate personal experiences, reminding us that knowledge is most valuable when understood and applied to our own lives. This raises an important question. How will understanding money as a cage and a tool change your approach to earning, saving, and living a life of both practical reality and profound awe?
Thank you so much for tuning in to Daily Review. We truly appreciate you joining us for your daily dose of literary exploration. Your support means the world to us and helps us continue to share these amazing books with you. If you're enjoying what you hear, please consider taking a moment to subscribe, rate, like, and comment on any of the platforms you're listening from. This really helps support our channel and allows us to get better and bring you even more great content. If today's reviews sparked your interest and you're ready to dive into a copy of the book, please consider using the link in our description to make your purchase. Not only does it make it easy for you to get your hands on the book, but it also directly supports our channel and the author, allowing us to keep bringing you more great content. Thanks again for being a part of the Tasty Review community.